we need to talk about Chinese motorcycles. And with that, welcome back to the Free Mouse MC YouTube channel. The perception around Chinese bikes right now is changing. Back in the day, they were really seen as like unreliable, kind of poor quality and not that nice. And right now, the perception is changing rapidly. From them winning a World Superbike Championship race recently to winning races in the Rally Dakar.
To be specific, Cove finished a stage of the Rally Dakar on first place.
To also them being more and more common in Europe on the street, and also in some countries like in Italy, a Benelli being the most sold bike in the last year. So what's happening here? And with me having ridden the CFMoto 675 SRR for the last 2 weeks, and also having some experience with Chinese bikes because I actually worked in a dealership for a year that sold Motomorinis, Benellis, Brixtons, Mashs, QJ, some other Chinese brand. Have trouble listing them all, and also I did some background production for motorcycle magazines on Chinese bikes. So that's kind of my background on the topic. Let's talk about where we're at with Chinese bikes and what the implications are for you as a motorcycle rider and the motorcycle industry. The thing is, both a lot of the negative pre-assumptions and now the newer developing image that is more positive are both true at the same time. There are many Chinese motorbikes brands which are basically in China build yourself a motorbike brand out of a box of different parts kind of brands, where you basically get an engine, get a frame, and then put a logo on it. And the parts are all kind of the same, and you see very similar bikes from different manufacturers sold under different names. And those can often be really tricky with quality control. An experience that I made there with, for example, Mash is basically a French company that then got bought by a Chinese company, and they're now releasing retro bikes. And the bikes are actually, they look decent, they're cool, they're even fun to drive. However, the quality control really catches up with them because even though they're supposed to be Honda licensed rebuilt engines, they have quality issues with the timing chain. When I worked at the motorcycle dealership, we got them often back with 900 kilometers on the clock, broken engine, and then basically the warranty kicked in, new engine got in, and then the engine was broken again, and then the 2 years of warranty were up. That is, of course, really bad, and this is kind of the bad side of Chinese bikes. However, the big advantage that Chinese bikes always had going for them is that they're quite cheap, and with living standards right now really going down and the amount of money that people have for their daily life going down, you see a lot of Chinese bikes getting more and more popular, and at the same time a lot of companies really want to get into the European market because the European market sometimes feels a little bit like marketing for the rest of the world. Some of the bikes that are popular here that maybe don't sell that well, that are not that detrimental to a brand, lead to a lot of really small bikes being sold in different countries from the same brand. And this is kind of the connection. So kind of the marketing game is being played in Europe. And now these brands kind of want to push here into Europe.
Another factor is that China is the second biggest world economy with also an enormous population and more skilled, highly trained workers.
Which results in a lot of established brands producing many parts there and buying a lot of technology from there, partially through joint ventures, similarly to how this CFMoto here is a joint venture between CFMoto and KTM, where CFMoto is producing some of the engines for KTM. We see similar things with BMW. BMW has engines that are produced by Loncin. I hope I pronounced that right. And these engines are not bad. These bikes managed to do a good job. I was at a trip through the Himalayas where some of the bikes were BMWs that were built in China, and they, in extreme harsh conditions, managed the trip really well. So the technical skill to build a good, reliable motorbike in China is definitely there, and then with the cheap labor prices, you get quite a good recipe for a strong competitor to the already established brands, and this is kind of what we're seeing right now.
With me talking about cheap labor and China here, I can already smell the negative comments in the comment section, and I recently had a similar experience with the electric motorbike video, kind of on a run with topics that potentially get negative comments. However, I want to address that real quick because it's kind of not the topic of this video, but I definitely want to say, yes, of course, there are definitely exploitative structures happening, but I also want to point out that don't believe for a second that European brands and American brands and brands from wherever are above that. The investment goes to where life and labor is cheap, always. Exploitation is the name of the game. Don't believe that anyone is above that.
Through the economic situation here in Europe, for a lot of people getting worse right now, people having less money to spend on hobbies, and all of a sudden, if you have less money, a Chinese motorbike starts looking a lot better. And this is also what you see in countries in Europe with less purchasing power. The smaller the purchasing power, the more Chinese bikes you already see on the road. In countries like Greece or the rest of the Balkans, you see so many Chinese bikes already at this point. And at the same time, we right now have a phase in motorcycles where the majority of motorcycles, not from like in general, not just from the Chinese manufacturers, are really, really good. So the standard of quality that bikes need to meet to sell well is really high. Basically, if we talk about reliability in a motorcycle review at this point, the majority of bikes are going to pass with flying colors. And in that way, the Chinese bikes also need to meet that standard. So at this point, they're also all meeting that standard. And then basically the difference is only made by the brand image and the price. And the price is then often tough to argue with. And with these bikes coming in really, really cheap and now also competing with their European and Japanese counterparts on the highest level, a lot more people are deciding for these bikes. However, it also shows a little bit of a weird conundrum because in a way, Chinese bikes are also competing with Chinese bikes that are not Chinese bikes per se. Because a lot of European manufacturers are buying the majority of parts in their motorbikes from China at this point. Engines, sensors, all that kind of stuff. And then it's built together in another Asian country and then sold here. So it's basically a race to the bottom when it comes to the price. And I think with this race to the bottom, the goal right now for, I think, Chinese brands is not anymore to basically make the most of profit, which could be maybe the case for the European brands. But the goal is to sell as many motorbikes as possible in that market to then later, when having pushed the other brands out, to potentially raise the price. Like other brands would definitely do the same. It's not like, oh my God, they're trying to do this or something. It's basically how our market economy works in some of the not so nice ways. However, the approach of thinking about the future of a business is a different one here.
Also, I think another key difference is a more long-term planning approach when it comes to planning on how to get into a market. That is especially visible when it comes to Chinese cars.
I don't know if this play of trying to take over the motorcycle industry in that way is actually going to pay off for Chinese motorbike brands, because the motorbike industry itself is struggling. Sales are down, marketing budgets are down, people in the industry are feeling that. It's a very constant discussion, and it's due to, like, first of all, demographic and economic changes both at the same time. And then you also have the problems of physics when building a competing motorbike. With it being a race to the bottom at this point, you try to offer better specs, and like a lot of customers make their decisions based on specs, and to some degree you can't make a motorbike physically lighter at some point, and we're really close to that point. And in that way, basically Chinese bikes and Chinese motorbike brands are motivated to go for the extreme. This is also something that kind of shows in the CFMoto here, because the design is completely opposite to the majority of other super sports. So I'm guessing they're going to build some quite extreme and really cool motorbikes in the process, which is, for us as customers, actually kind of great. I think we're going to get to see a lot of wild designs, wild motorbikes per se that have like special engines and all that kind of stuff. The stuff that we're already seeing right now with there being V8 motorbikes, boxer engines coming back, all that kind of stuff. However, I'm not 100% sure if this gamble that Chinese motorbike brands are taking here is going to pay off. Because of course, motorcycles with extreme designs and extreme figures, if they can realistically be managed, is like cool, you know? However, one anecdote from selling motorbikes in a motorbike dealership is you sometimes have the coolest bikes standing there and you have them in the coolest color, and then there's some plain black or plain dark blue, dark green. It's the one you never look at, and that is the one where you constantly are reordering the model. Like, really overly cool bikes don't necessarily sell. They're more of a niche thing often, and what sells is more of the boring plain stuff. And if the only way to compete is to lean into the extreme, I don't know if this gamble is going to pay off. Also, with basically this race to the bottom price-wise in what can be described as a dying industry. And in that way, I'm not necessarily sure if Chinese bikes are going to take over. Sadly, the thing that could be stopping them from taking over is the motorcycle industry dying out to begin with. What's really going to happen is a little bit written in the stars and no one really knows. What is your opinion on it? Definitely feel free to write it in the comments, and see you guys in the next video.